The streets of downtown Chicago buzzed with energy on a chilly Friday afternoon. People hurried along the sidewalks, their breath visible in the crisp air as they rushed to catch trains, meet deadlines, or escape the cold. The city was alive, with noise, honking cars, chatter from street vendors, and the rhythmic clatter of footsteps echoing off the pavement. Yet amidst all this activity, one figure went completely unnoticed. She was an elderly woman, standing quietly near the entrance of the train station. Her appearance was unassuming. A faded gray coat that had seen better days, scuffed shoes barely holding together, and a scarf loosely wrapped around her head. She clutched a small leather purse tightly against her chest, as if it held something precious. Her face carried the weight of many years, her skin lined like the pages of an old book, but her eyes still held a flicker of life. They darted nervously around, searching for something, or someone, but finding nothing familiar. Despite her obvious distress, no one stopped to help. A businessman in a sharp suit nearly collided with her as he rushed by, his phone pressed to his ear. When he muttered a quick sorry without even looking at her, she didn't respond. Another woman pushed past her stroller, balancing 2 cups of coffee while chatting animatedly on her phone. Children tugged at their parents' hands, eager to leave the crowded area, but none of them spared the older woman a second glance. Even those who worked nearby seemed indifferent. An older man selling newspapers from a stand across the street glanced up occasionally, noticing her confused expression. He thought about offering assistance, but then shrugged it off, assuming someone else would step in. After all, there were so many people passing by, it wasn't his responsibility, right? But minutes turned into an hour, and still no one approached her. The woman shuffled slightly, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. She looked down at the ground, perhaps hoping to find some clue that would jog her memory. Where was she supposed to go? Who was she supposed to meet? These questions swirled in her mind, though she couldn't voice them. Occasionally, she opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Fear crept into her heart. Was anyone going to notice her? As time dragged on, the temperature dropped, and the wind picked up, biting at exposed skin. The woman pulled, her coat tighter around herself, trying to stay warm. A young couple walked by, laughing loudly about plans for the weekend. One of them accidentally bumped into her, causing her to stumble backward slightly. "Watch where you're going," the man snapped before realizing whom he'd spoken to. For a brief moment, guilt flashed across his face, but instead of apologizing further, he grabbed his girlfriend's hand and hurried away. It wasn't just adults who ignored her. Children did too. A group of teenagers sauntered by, headphones, blaring music loud enough for everyone within 10 feet to hear. One of them glanced at the woman briefly, his brow furrowing in curiosity, but then he shrugged and kept walking. To him, she was just another part of the urban landscape, a fixture to be overlooked like a lamppost or a trash can. Yet despite being invisible to almost everyone, the woman remained hopeful. Every now and then, she raised her head, scanning the crowd for a friendly face. Surely someone would stop. Surely someone cared. Her faith in humanity hadn't completely faded, though it grew weaker with each passing minute. Meanwhile, Malik Johnson was finishing up his shift at a cafe a few blocks away. At 17 years old, Malik juggled schoolwork, a part-time job, and helping his mom take care of his younger siblings. Life wasn't easy, but he always managed to keep a positive attitude. As he wiped down tables and prepared to clock out, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important was waiting for him outside. When Malik finally stepped onto the sidewalk, he immediately spotted the lost woman. Unlike everyone else, he didn't rush past her. Instead, he slowed down, studying her carefully. There was something about her demeanor, her quiet desperation, that caught his attention. Without thinking twice, he crossed the street and approached her cautiously. "Ma'am," Malik said softly, making sure not to startle her. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The woman looked up, startled at first, but then relief washed over her features. She nodded hesitantly, her lips trembling as she tried to form words. It took a few moments, but eventually, she managed to explain that she was lost and couldn't remember how to get home. Her voice was weak, barely audible over the din of the city, but Malik leaned in closer, listening intently. What followed was a simple yet profound act of kindness. Malik extended his hand, offering reassurance and companionship. In that moment, he became the person the woman had been waiting for, the one who saw her when no one else did. And though neither of them realized it yet, this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. Malik Johnson wasn't the kind of person who could walk away from someone in need. Growing up in a neighborhood where struggles were as common as the cracks in the sidewalk, he had learned early on that kindness mattered more than anything else. So when he saw the elderly woman standing alone and clearly lost near the train station, something inside him tugged at his heart. He couldn't just leave her there. Approaching her cautiously, Malik made sure to keep his tone gentle and reassuring. "Ma'am," he called out softly, not wanting to startle her. The woman turned her head toward him, her cloudy blue eyes widening slightly. For a moment, she seemed unsure whether to trust this stranger, a young black teenager wearing a hoodie and sneakers. But then she nodded hesitantly, as if giving him permission to speak. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" Malik asked again, taking another small step closer. His voice carried warmth and his smile was genuine. It was the kind of smile that could melt even the coldest winter day. The woman swallowed hard, her lips trembling as she tried to find the right words. I don't know where I am," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't remember how to get home." Her hands tightened around the strap of her purse, betraying her anxiety. Malik's heart sank. He could see the fear in her eyes, the confusion etched into every wrinkle on her face. She looked so vulnerable, like a leaf caught in a storm, unable to find its way back to the ground. Without hesitation, he reached out his hand, offering it to her. "Don't worry, ma'am, I'll help you," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for doubt. At first, the woman hesitated. She glanced at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. There was something about him, his calm demeanor, his steady gaze, that made her feel safe. Slowly, she placed her frail hand in his, and Malik gently guided her to a nearby bench. The gesture was simple, but it meant everything to her. In that moment, she wasn't invisible anymore. Someone had seen her. Someone cared. Once they were seated, Malik leaned forward slightly, making sure to maintain eye contact. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked patiently. The woman blinked a few times before answering, her voice still shaky. "Eleanor," she said. "My name is Eleanor." "That's a beautiful name," Malik replied with a grin, hoping to lighten the mood. "And do you remember where you live, Eleanor? Any streets or landmarks?" Eleanor frowned, her brow furrowing as she tried to recall details. "There's a big gate," she murmured after a long pause. "And trees. Lots of trees." She paused again, searching her memory. "I think it's near a park, but I'm not sure." Malik nodded encouragingly, piecing together what little information she gave him. He pulled out his phone and opened a map app, scrolling through neighborhoods until he found one that matched her vague description. "Okay, we're getting somewhere," he said confidently. "Let's see if we can figure this out together." As they waited for a taxi, Malik stayed by her side, chatting lightly to keep her calm. He told her about his day at work, cracking jokes about clumsy customers who spilled coffee everywhere. Eleanor listened intently, her lips curling into a faint smile despite her worries. For the first time in hours, she felt like she wasn't entirely alone. When the taxi arrived, Malik helped Eleanor inside, making sure she was comfortable before climbing in beside her. "Where to?" the driver asked gruffly, glancing at them in the rearview mirror. Malik hesitated, realizing he didn't have an exact address yet. "We're trying to figure that out," he explained, turning to Eleanor. "Do you recognize any of these places as we drive?" Eleanor nodded weakly, clutching her purse tightly. As the taxi moved through the city streets, Malik pointed out landmarks, asking Eleanor if anything looked familiar. At first she shook her head, her frustration growing with each passing block. But then, as they turned onto a wide avenue lined with towering oak trees, her eyes lit up. "Yes," she exclaimed suddenly, surprising both Malik and the driver. "This is it." Keep going straight. The driver raised an eyebrow but followed her instructions, eventually pulling up to a massive iron gate surrounded by lush greenery. Malik stared in awe as the gate swung open automatically, revealing a sprawling estate unlike anything he'd ever seen. The mansion stood proudly in the distance, its windows gleaming in the fading sunlight. Manicured gardens stretched out, across the property dotted with fountains and statues. For a moment, Malik forgot to breathe. This wasn't just a house. It was a palace. How could someone like Eleanor, dressed so plainly and wandering aimlessly in the city, belong to such a place? Before he could process what he was seeing, a housekeeper rushed out of the front door, relief washing over her face. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Oh my goodness, we've been looking everywhere for you," she exclaimed, helping Eleanor out of the car. Malik froze, his mind racing. Whitmore? The name sounded familiar, though he couldn't quite place it. He watched as the housekeeper fussed over Eleanor, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders and guiding her toward the house. Just as Malik was about to slip away quietly, Eleanor stopped and turned back to him. "Young man," she said, her voice stronger now. "Won't you come inside? I owe you more than just a ride home." Malik hesitated, unsure of what to say. He hadn't done anything extraordinary. He'd simply been kind. But Eleanor's expression was insistent, almost pleading. Reluctantly, he nodded and followed her inside, unaware that this decision would change his life forever. Inside the mansion, Malik marveled at the opulence surrounding him. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting rainbows of light across marble floors. Paintings adorned the walls, their frames gilded with gold. Everywhere he looked, there was evidence of wealth beyond imagination. Yet despite the grandeur, the atmosphere felt warm and welcoming thanks to Eleanor's presence. Over dinner, Malik learned more about the woman he had helped. Eleanor Whitmore wasn't just wealthy, she was a legend in Chicago, known for building a business empire from scratch and using her fortune to support countless charitable causes. But beneath the accolades and achievements lay a lonely soul who had spent years yearning for connection. As they talked, Malik realized that his act of kindness had touched Eleanor deeply, not because of who she was, but because of who he was. A compassionate young man who had chosen to care when no one else did. And in that moment, sitting at a table fit for royalty, Malik understood that true value wasn't measured in dollars or possessions. It was measured in moments like these, where humanity shone brightest. The grandeur of Eleanor Whitmore's mansion was overwhelming, even for someone like Malik, who had seen glimpses of wealth on TV and in movies. As he followed Eleanor into the house, his sneakers squeaked softly against the polished marble floor, a stark contrast to the quiet elegance that surrounded him. The air smelled faintly of lavender and fresh linen, and every corner seemed to sparkle with care and attention. Yet despite the opulence, there was a warmth to the place, a feeling that it wasn't just a house but a home. Eleanor led Malik to a cozy dining room, where a long oak table stood beneath an ornate chandelier. She gestured for him to sit, and, within minutes, plates of food began arriving, carried by a kind-looking housekeeper named Rosa. There were steaming bowls of soup, fluffy rolls still warm from the oven, roasted vegetables drizzled with herbs, and slices of tender chicken arranged neatly on a platter. It was far more food than two people could possibly eat, but Malik didn't dare comment. Instead, he thanked Rosa politely as she placed a napkin beside his plate. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally, though Malik couldn't help feeling a bit out of place. He was used to eating dinner at the small kitchen table in his apartment, often balancing homework on his lap while listening to his mom talk about the day. This setting, this world, was entirely foreign to him. But Eleanor had a way of putting people at ease. Her voice was soft, yet steady. Her questions, thoughtful and genuine, she asked Malik about his life, his family, and his dreams for the future. "I'm working hard to graduate high school," Malik explained between bites of chicken. "I want to go to college, maybe study social work or something like that. I'd love to help kids who don't have much, give them a chance to succeed." Eleanor nodded approvingly, her eyes lighting up. "That's admirable, Malik. So many young people your age are focused only on themselves, but you think about others. She paused, her gaze drifting off for a moment before returning to him. You remind me of myself when I was younger. Malik tilted his head curiously. Really? What do you mean? Eleanor smiled faintly, leaning back in her chair. For the first time since they'd met, she opened up about her own life. She told Malik how she had grown up poor in a small Midwestern town, the daughter of farmers who struggled to make ends meet. When she was just 19, tragedy struck. A fire destroyed their farm, leaving her family with nothing. Determined to rebuild their lives, Eleanor moved to Chicago, taking odd jobs to survive. She worked as a seamstress, a waitress, and eventually landed a position at a textile company. Through sheer grit and determination, she climbed the ranks, learning everything she could about business until she finally started her own venture. It wasn't easy, Eleanor admitted, her voice tinged with nostalgia. There were days when I thought I couldn't go on, days when I felt invisible, just like today. But I kept going because I believed in myself, and because there were always a few kind souls along the way who reminded me that I mattered. Her words resonated deeply with Malik. He understood what it meant to feel invisible. Growing up in a rough neighborhood, he often felt overlooked by teachers, classmates, and even strangers on the street. People assumed things about him based on the color of his skin or the clothes he wore, dismissing him before they even knew his name. But tonight, sitting across from Eleanor Whitmore, he realized that kindness had the power to change perceptions and lives. After dinner, Eleanor insisted on showing Malik around the house. They wandered through rooms filled with memories, a library lined with books she had read over decades, a sunroom bursting with potted plants, and a music room where an old piano sat waiting to be played. In each space, Eleanor shared stories of her past, the triumphs, the heartaches, and the lessons learned along the way. At one point, they stopped in front of a large portrait hanging in the hallway. It depicted a younger Eleanor standing beside a man with salt and pepper hair and a gentle smile. "That's my late husband, Charles," she said softly. "He was my partner in everything. We built this life together." Her voice wavered, slightly, and Malik noticed the sadness in her eyes. But after he passed, things changed. The loneliness set in. Money can buy a lot of things, Malik, but it can't buy companionship. Malik listened intently, his respect for Eleanor growing with every word. Despite her immense wealth, she wasn't immune to pain or longing. If anything, her story made her seem more human, more relatable. And her vulnerability inspired him to open up further. "I know what you mean about loneliness," Malik confessed as they returned to the living room. "Sometimes it feels like no one sees me. Not really, like I'm just another face in the crowd. But today, when you looked at me, it was different. You saw me." Eleanor reached out and placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but meaningful. "Because you saw me too, Malik. You saw me when no one else did. That's rare these days. People are so busy looking down at their phones or rushing to get somewhere that they forget to look up. They forget to see each other." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with truth. Malik nodded silently, absorbing the weight of what she was saying. He thought about all the times he had been ignored or dismissed simply because of where he came from. And now here he was, sitting in a billionaire's mansion, having a heartfelt conversation with a woman who valued him not for his background but for his character. Before Malik left that evening, Eleanor surprised him with an offer that would alter the course of his life. "Malik," she began, her tone serious yet warm, "you've done something extraordinary today. You reminded me of the goodness in humanity, and I want to repay that kindness. I'd like to help you achieve your dreams." Malik blinked, unsure if he'd heard her correctly. "Help me? How?" Eleanor smiled, her eyes twinkling with determination. "I'll cover your tuition for college. All of it. Whatever school you choose, whatever program you want to pursue, I'll take care of it. And I'll also provide support for your family, so you don't have to worry about working multiple jobs while studying." For a moment, Malik was speechless. His mind raced with disbelief and gratitude. This woman, whom he had helped without expecting anything in return, was offering him a lifeline, a chance to break free from the cycle of struggle that had defined his upbringing. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he struggled to find the right words. "Thank you," he managed to say finally, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't need to repay me," Eleanor replied gently. "Just promise me one thing. Use this opportunity to make a difference. Be the person who sees others when no one else does. Pay it forward, Malik, that's all I ask." As Malik hugged Eleanor goodbye and stepped outside into the cool night air, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world might be full of people, too busy to notice each other, but he knew now that even the smallest act of kindness could create ripples far beyond what anyone could imagine. And thanks to Eleanor Whitmore, he was ready to start making waves. The next morning, Malik woke up with a sense of disbelief. Had the events of the previous day really happened? The lost elderly woman, the luxurious mansion, Eleanor Whitmore's generosity, it all felt like something out of a movie. But when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, reality came rushing back. It was Eleanor. "Good morning, Malik." The message read, "I've arranged for a car to pick you and your mom up at 10 a.m. Please don't hesitate to bring any questions or concerns you might have." Malik stared at the screen, his heart pounding. He had always been taught to be cautious about accepting help from strangers, but this wasn't just anyone. It was Eleanor. She had seen him, truly seen him, in a way that few people ever did. And now she wanted to help not only him but also his family. Still, he knew he couldn't make such a big decision on his own. This was something he needed to discuss with his mom. When Malik told her about Eleanor's offer over breakfast, his mother, Lisa, listened intently, her expression shifting between shock, gratitude, and skepticism. "Are you sure about this?" she asked finally, folding her hands on the table. "It sounds incredible, but we can't just accept charity without understanding what's expected in return." "I know, Mom," Malik replied earnestly, "but Eleanor isn't asking for anything except that I use the opportunity to do good. She wants me to pay it forward, to help others the way she's helping us." Lisa sighed, her eyes softening as she looked at her son. Malik had always been the kind of kid who put others first, whether it was babysitting his younger siblings after school or volunteering at the community center on weekends. If anyone deserved a chance like this, it was him. "All right," Shiamara said, finally nodding. "Let's hear her out. But remember, Malik, we're not taking anything unless it feels right." When the car arrived, a sleek black sedan that seemed far too fancy for their modest neighborhood, Malik and Lisa climbed in nervously. Neither of them had ever ridden in such a luxurious vehicle before, and the driver's polite demeanor only added to the surreal experience. As they drove through the city streets toward Eleanor's estate, Malik noticed how quiet his mom was. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, and her lips were pressed into a thin line. He reached over and squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's going to be okay, Mom," he whispered. "Trust me." When they arrived, Rosa greeted them warmly at the door and led them to a spacious office where Eleanor was waiting. Dressed in a simple yet elegant sweater and slacks, she rose from her chair with a smile that immediately put them at ease. "Welcome," she said, gesturing for them to sit. "Thank you both for coming." For the next hour, Eleanor laid out her plan in detail. She explained that she would cover Malik's full tuition at any university he chose, along with expenses like housing, books, and supplies. Additionally, she offered financial assistance to Lisa and the rest of the family, ensuring they wouldn't have to worry about making ends meet while Malik pursued his education. There were no strings attached, no obligations beyond Malik's promise to use his opportunities wisely. Lisa listened carefully, her initial skepticism slowly giving way to awe. By the end of the conversation, tears were streaming down her face. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "This is more than we could ever ask for." "There's no need to thank me," Eleanor replied kindly. "You've raised an extraordinary young man, Lisa. I'm simply giving him the tools to shine." Over the following months, Malik threw himself into preparing for college. With Eleanor's support, he applied to several universities, ultimately choosing Northwestern, where he planned to study social work. His acceptance letter arrived in the spring, and the entire family celebrated as if they'd won the lottery. For the first time in years, there was hope in their home, a belief that things could get better. Eleanor didn't stop there, though. She became a mentor and friend to Malik and his family, often inviting them to her estate for dinners or holidays. On Thanksgiving, she insisted they join her for a feast so lavish it made Lisa laugh until she cried. "We've never had pumpkin pie this fancy," she exclaimed, shaking her head in amazement. But perhaps the most profound impact Eleanor had was on Malik's outlook. She taught him the importance of using privilege responsibly, not just financial privilege, but the privilege of knowledge, opportunity, and influence. Through their conversations, Malik began to see himself as someone who could affect real change in the world. Whether it was advocating for underfunded schools, mentoring kids in his old neighborhood, or simply being present for those who felt invisible, he vowed to honor Eleanor's legacy of compassion. Meanwhile, Eleanor found joy in reconnecting with humanity through Malik and his family. After years of isolation, she cherished the laughter, warmth, and love they brought into her life. They reminded her that wealth meant little without connection, and that true fulfillment came from giving rather than accumulating. As graduation approached, Malik delivered a speech at his high school ceremony that left the audience in tears. Standing on stage in his borrowed cap and gown, he spoke about resilience, gratitude, and the power of kindness. "Sometimes," he said, looking directly at Eleanor, who was sitting in the front row, "all it takes is one person to believe in you. One act of kindness to remind you that you matter. I wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Mrs. Whitmore, but more importantly, I wouldn't be here if I hadn't chosen to care about someone else. So my advice to you is this: see people, really see them, because you never know how much it might mean or how far it might take them." The crowd erupted into applause, but Malik barely heard it. His eyes were locked on Eleanor, who sat dabbing her tears with a tissue, her face glowing with pride. In that moment, they both knew that their lives had been forever changed, not by money or fame, but by the simple, transformative act of seeing and being seen. Years passed, and Malik's journey unfolded in ways he could never have imagined. After graduating from Northwestern University at the top of his class, he dedicated himself to serving underserved communities, just as he had promised Eleanor. He worked tirelessly, helping families navigate systems that often felt impossible to understand, mentoring young people who reminded him of his younger self, and advocating for policies that addressed inequality. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. Soon, news outlets began highlighting his work, calling him a beacon of hope for struggling neighborhoods. But Malik wasn't doing this for recognition. Every time he stepped into a classroom or sat down with a family in need, he thought about Eleanor, the woman who had believed in him when no one else did. Her lessons stayed with him. Kindness mattered more than anything, and true wealth was measured not by what you owned, but by how you made others feel. These principles guided every decision he made, shaping him into the person he was becoming. Eleanor, too, continued to inspire those around her. Though she was well into her 90s, she remained active in philanthropy, using her resources to fund scholarships, community centers, and programs aimed at uplifting marginalized groups. She often credited Malik with reigniting her passion for giving back. "He reminded me why I started all of this in the first place," she told reporters during one rare interview. "It's not about the money, it's about connection, about seeing someone and saying, 'You matter.'" Their bond deepened over the years, evolving into a friendship that transcended age, background, and circumstance. Malik visited Eleanor regularly, bringing updates on his work and sharing stories of the lives he was touching. In return, Eleanor shared wisdom born from decades of experience, offering guidance whenever he faced challenges. Together, they formed a partnership rooted in mutual respect and love, a testament to the power of human connection. One winter evening, as snow blanketed Chicago, Malik received a call from Rosa. Eleanor had taken a turn for the worse. Hurrying to her estate, he found her resting in her favorite armchair by the fireplace, wrapped in a soft blanket. Despite her frailty, her eyes lit up when she saw him. "Malik," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with affection. "You came." "Of course I came," he replied, kneeling beside her. "You're my family." They spent hours talking that night, reminiscing about their journey together. Eleanor spoke fondly of the day they met, chuckling softly as she recalled how startled she had been when Malik approached her near the train station. "I thought no one would stop," she admitted. "And then there you were, this bright, kind young man who refused to let me fade into the background." Malik smiled, brushing away a tear. "You changed everything for me, Eleanor. You gave me a chance when I didn't think I had one. And you gave me purpose," she countered gently. "Never forget that, Malik. What we've done together, it's bigger than either of us. It's proof that even in a world full of distractions, kindness can still cut through the noise." Eleanor Whitmore passed away peacefully a few weeks later, surrounded by those she loved. Her funeral was attended by hundreds, friends, beneficiaries of her philanthropy, and strangers whose lives she had touched indirectly. But it was Malik who delivered the eulogy, standing before the congregation with tears streaming down his face. "She taught me that humanity's greatest currency isn't money or power. It's compassion," he said, his voice steady despite his grief. "Age, race, wealth, they don't define us. What defines us is how we treat each other. Eleanor saw me when no one else did, and because of that, I learned to see others. She showed me that even the smallest act of kindness can ripple outward, changing lives in ways we may never fully understand." As Malik spoke, he glanced at the crowd, noticing the diverse faces looking back at him. Among them were children he had mentored, families he had helped, and colleagues who had joined him in his mission. Each of them carried a piece of Eleanor's legacy within them, just as Malik did. And though she was gone, her spirit lived on, through their actions. In the months that followed, Malik honored Eleanor's memory by expanding his outreach efforts. He founded a nonprofit organization called the Whitmore Initiative, dedicated to providing educational and financial support to low-income students. The program quickly gained traction, thanks in part to Eleanor's final gift, a substantial endowment left specifically for this cause. Through the initiative, Malik ensured that countless young people would have opportunities they might otherwise never have had. News of their story spread far beyond Chicago. Articles were written, documentaries filmed, and speeches given about the unlikely friendship between a billionaire and a teenager, and the profound impact it had on both their lives. People began reflecting on their own behavior, asking themselves whether they truly saw the people around them. Social media campaigns encouraged acts of kindness, urging individuals to take a moment to notice those who might otherwise be overlooked. For Malik, the most rewarding part was watching how Eleanor's philosophy inspired others. A young girl, named Tasha, one of the first recipients of the Whitmore Initiative Scholarship, wrote him a letter thanking him for believing in her potential. "You remind me of Eleanor," she wrote. "Because of you, I know I can make a difference too." Reading those words, Malik felt a surge of pride, not just for himself, but for the chain reaction of goodness that had begun with a single act of kindness. Years later, as Malik stood on stage receiving an award for his contributions to society, he took a moment to look out at the audience. There were familiar faces, his mom, siblings, former teachers, and unfamiliar ones, people whose lives he had yet to touch. But in every pair of eyes, he saw the same spark of hope that Eleanor had ignited in him all those years ago. "None of this would have been possible without Eleanor Whitmore," he said during his acceptance speech. "She taught me that everyone has value, regardless of where they come from or what they look like. She taught me to see people, not as strangers, but as human beings deserving of love and respect. And she taught me that even in our darkest moments there is always light if we choose to look for it." As the applause echoed around him, Malik felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for Eleanor, but for the journey they had shared. Their story was proof that kindness, no matter how small, could transform lives. It was proof that seeing someone, truly seeing them, was one of the greatest gifts we could give. And it was proof that even in a world that often felt chaotic and divided, compassion had the power to bring us together. Eleanor may have left this world, but her legacy endured, in Malik's work, in the lives he touched, and in the countless ripples of kindness that continued to spread long after she was gone. Together, they had shown the world that humanity's greatest strength lay not in its achievements, but in its ability to care for one another.